What's the best way to get around London? By boat, of course. Yeah, that was actually a thing, and these guys made it happen. It's a story about the lightermen and watermen of London. But did you know that this mighty waterway was once upon a time the main road into London? That's right. In the olden times before roads and cars and such, if you wanted to do some serious trading, then the river was the way to go. These guys were responsible for moving the goods along the river, and they had a variety of vessels at their disposal. They had the barges, which were the workhorses of the river. They usually had set routes that they followed, and they charged fares based on the distance traveled. The watermen were also required to have a knowledge of the river that was unmatched by anyone else. They knew the best spots for mooring, the best places to avoid, and the best times to travel. They were also skilled oarsmen and boatmen, and they had to be quick and agile to navigate the often crowded waters of the Thames. They were the original taxi service in London, providing an essential link between the various communities that lived along the river. One of the most famous routes for the watermen was between Greenwich and Chelsea, and it was known as the Long Reach. The journey took about 3 hours, and the watermen would often have to contend with the strong currents and winds that whipped across the river. These were long, low boats that could carry heavy loads of goods. Firstly, they were essential to the growth of London as a commercial center. The lightermen and watermen were an integral part of London life for centuries, and their contribution to the city's history is undeniable. They were unsung heroes who kept the city running and helped to shape it into what it is today. So next time you find yourself strolling along the banks of the Thames, take a moment to remember the lightermen and watermen who made London what it is. London's position on the Thames was key to its development as a major trading hub. And without the lightermen to move the goods around, the city would not have been able to flourish in the way that it did. Secondly, they played a role in the defense of London, and the lightermen were responsible for moving supplies and equipment up and down the river. This helped to ensure that the city was prepared for any eventuality. Thirdly, they contributed to the cultural development of London. The river was a popular spot for recreation in the 16th and 17th centuries, and the watermen and lightermen were responsible for providing the boats and barges that people used to enjoy the water. They also played a role in the development of London's theater scene, as many of the actors and actresses who performed in the city's famous playhouses lived along the river. The boats and barges that the lightermen and watermen provided were often used to transport the cast and crew to and from the theater. The journey took about 3 hours, and the watermen would often have to contend with the strong currents and winds that whipped across the river. Despite the challenges, the watermen were an integral part of London life. They were exposed to the elements and had to contend with the ever-present risk of shifting loads or drowning. Despite the hardships, the lightermen were an important part of the economic engine that drove London forward. They moved the goods that kept the city running, and they did it all with a minimum of fuss. Then there were the lighters, which were smaller than barges and were used for carrying lighter loads or for moving goods between larger vessels and the shore. First up, the lightermen. These guys were responsible for moving goods both up and down the river, and they had a variety of vessels at their disposal. They had the barges, which were the workhorses of the river. These were long, low boats that could carry heavy loads of goods. Then there were the lighters, which were smaller than barges and were used for carrying lighter loads or for moving goods between larger vessels and the shore. And finally, you had the wherries, which were flat-bottom boats that were great for carrying bulky loads such as timber. And it wasn't just for big, bulky goods either. People used the river as a form of public transport too. And that's where the watermen come in. Now you might be thinking, who the hell are they? And fair enough. They're not exactly household names. But they were pretty important to the history of London, and without them, our city would definitely not be the same. This is a tale as old as time itself, or at least as old as the River Thames. They were exposed to the elements and had to contend with the ever-present risk of moving loads or drowning. Despite the hardships, The lightermen were an important part of the economic engine that drove London forward. They moved the goods that kept the city running, and they did it all with a minimum of fuss. But let's start from the beginning. We all know that London straddles the River Thames, which flows right through the heart of the city. The lightermen would often work long and irregular hours, and their work was dangerous and dirty. Then there were the watermen. These guys were responsible for ferrying passengers across the river, and they worked on a more regular schedule than the lightermen. One of the most famous routes for the watermen was between Greenwich and Chelsea, and was known as the Long Reach. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you learned something new, and we hope to see you back again soon for another historical adventure. Until then, keep learning and keep exploring. It would really help build my channel if you could hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos.